Stacktastic, the weekly web show for the avid comic book reader and those who aspire to become so. This week, in honor of Supurbia number 5 hitting shelves with the beginning of a brand new story arc, I'm going to deliver my top 10 list of supporting characters in comics. They've always interested me more than the capes, one of the reasons I created Supurbia, and I know that many of you identify with them as well. After all, they're us, unless of course you've got superpowers. And they can always use all the love they can get, as I don't understand why they haven't gotten more of their own titles beyond Superman's girlfriend Lois Lane, Superman's pal Jimmy Olsen, and Gotham Central. Also, before we start, please note that I've disqualified all love interests, and I'm happy to say 3 female characters still made the list. Let's get started. Number 10 is Jimmy Olsen. How did such an iconic supporting character end up at the bottom of my list? Well, the thing is that these days his role in Superman's adventures has been drastically reduced. So much so that Christopher Nolan and Zack Snyder felt they needed to turn him into a girl in their new movie to spice things up. But still, after Robin, Olsen is without a doubt DC Comics and perhaps all of comics' most recognizable teen character with the mainstream. And never underestimate the importance of being popular with the mainstream. Isn't that what determines the invulnerability of the characters in Fables? Same thing here. Writers have tried to make Olsen hip by giving him powers, an interesting dating life, or his own stints as the boy hostage. None have worked. What do you think it would take to make Jimmy Olsen hip? Number 9 is Etta Candy. Above Jimmy Olsen? I put her here at number 9 because besides the Greek gods, she's one of the few characters from the Wonder Woman mythos to make an impression with comic book readers. And considering how weak an impression Wonder Woman makes, that's impressive. But even more so, besides Amanda Waller, who's currently being transitioned from a villain to a supporting character, maybe, Etta is one of the few full-figured female characters in comics. She even ended up landing Steve Trevor after dealing with a progressive eating disorder arc in the pages of Wonder Woman. Diana is supposed to be a shining example for all women, so it's great to give her a best friend. As Taylor Swift recently pointed out, there's a special place in hell for women who don't help other women. Although, ironically, I'd say Etta is the Amy Poehler to Wonder Woman's Tina Fey. Make that Rashida Jones. As in the New 52, Etta has been reimagined as a black woman and much more trim. Kinda like Waller. DC, do you double check these things? Plus, sadly, she's no longer in Wonder Woman's book, but instead placed alongside Steve Trevor for what we can only assume is a pending romance. Although, I think a Trevor-Waller relationship would be a lot more steamy. Number 8 is Val Cooper. Who? Think Maria Hill meets Ultimate Carol Danvers meets the New 52 Steve Trevor. Yes, back in the 1980s and 90s, Cooper was a regular fixture with our Merry Mutants, serving as a national security advisor on metahuman affairs. She established and led Freedom Force, made up of Mystique's Brotherhood of Evil Mutants when they briefly swore allegiance to the US government, for selfish reasons of course, and later X-Factor, where she borrowed a page from the Suicide Squad by implanting a bomb in Mystique's body to keep her under control. It didn't work for long. Neither did Cooper. She's largely absent from today's storylines, but when she does pop up, now you'll know she's supposed to be a clever cameo. The reason she still makes this list is because she led and fought alongside some of the most powerful beings in the Marvel Universe, without Marvel ever selling out and giving her powers. Number 7 is Maria Hill. Yes, all 3 female characters are grouped together towards the back of this list because while we've made progress, it hasn't been leaps and bounds. But still, considering that Hill has only been around since 2005, yet now runs S.H.I.E.L.D. in the comics and made it into the Avengers movie, this career woman is doing pretty well for herself. Now, she did sleep with Tony Stark, but I've decided to use the loophole that it was just sex and not love. Besides, I'm sure that's what they're telling themselves anyway. Today, after a brief stint leading the Avengers, Hill continues to run S.H.I.E.L.D. and appears in multiple Marvel Now books, most notably The Indestructible Hulk, where she struggles to stay a few steps ahead of Bruce Banner, who now works for her. Plus, when Magneto decided to become a mole for S.H.I.E.L.D. against Cyclops, who did he insist on turning himself into? Maria freaking Hill. Number 6 is J. Jonah Jameson, not only one of Spider-Man's greatest supporting characters, but one with almost as rich a history. Some of you might argue that he's a villain, but his crusade against New York City's webbed vigilante is merely the result of an ordinary man asked to deal with the extraordinary and failing. Sure, at first Jameson was portrayed as more of a caricature, but over the years, skilled writers have added many emotional layers to his journey and tested him just as they have Peter Parker, as well as even joining the Parker and Jameson families. And of course, who can overlook the fascinating twist in Brian Michael Bendis' Ultimate title, where Jameson came to believe in Spider-Man and protect him. But in defense of the 616 version of J. Jonah Jameson, in today's complicated world, can any of us really say we wouldn't have some doubts about the appearance of a vigilante? Number 5 is Slam Bradley, and if you've read Darwyn Cooke and Ed Brubaker's Catwoman, you might even think he belongs higher up on this list. Again, am I breaking my no love interest rule? Nope, because his love for Selina Kyle was a one-way street, at least in that way. But even before his noir romp in the pages of Catwoman, which was rich with supporting characters, making it a truly unique if underselling book, Private Detective Bradley was solving crimes in the DC Universe since 1937. He was even one of the stars of Detective Comics before Batman took it over. Man, does the Bat have to take everything from poor Slam? But even more devastating is that Selina Kyle ends up dating his son, Slam Bradley Jr., and having a baby with him. Ugh. By the way, speaking of Catwoman's downhill sliding quality towards the end, want to know why Holly Robinson didn't make this list? Because I'll never forgive her, or DC, for having her replace Selina as Catwoman. Right now, Slam's missing from the New 52, but considering the poor reaction to their Catwoman title, it's likely only a matter of time until he returns. Number 4 is Agent Coulson, a supporting character who has only begun to tap into his potential. Unlike anyone else on this list, Coulson was born on the silver screen instead of the page, brought to life by comedic actor Clark Gregg. Gregg was originally cast as Coulson by friend Jon Favreau in a small role that was meant to be a one-time thing. But Gregg was an instant hit with audiences, and Marvel, looking for inventive yet cheap ways to tie their cinematic universe together, signed him up for multiple films after Iron Man 2. He quickly graduated to a larger role in Thor, and then even became the star of his own series of shorts that Marvel produced to incentivize the sale of their DVD releases. And he even popped up in the animated series Ultimate Spider-Man. Then came The Avengers 2, where Marvel Studios felt the movie needed a death that would matter to fans, but of course they couldn't kill off one of their heroes. They chose Coulson. But instead of fans erupting in sorrow, they erupted in disbelief, unwilling to accept that such a unique character had been taken off the board. Well, of course, we were all right in our assumption, with Coulson set to star in ABC's S.H.I.E.L.D. television show, and probably appear in every Marvel movie until they stop making them. Yes, after Downey Jr., nobody is more of a Marvel Studios team player than Gregg. Finally, Coulson has also been introduced in the pages of Marvel Comics along with his good pal Nick Fury Jr., getting his own miniseries and joining the team in Marvel Now's Secret Avengers. I just wish they'd draw him to look like Clark Gregg. Number 3 is Jonathan and Martha Kent when they're alive. Yes, despite setting the moral compass of the most powerful character in DC Comics, the publisher often decides to do away with the Kents, famously with the opening death of Jonathan Kent in Richard Donner's Superman, and now again in the New 52, although that might be for legal reasons. And perhaps DC feels the Kents are at fault for making Clark Kent such a Boy Scout, as the flagship character has become a tougher and tougher sell as mainstream audiences gravitate toward darker stories. But still, remember what I said about how important it is to be popular or at least well known with the mainstream? Pretty much everyone on the planet Earth, comic book reader or not, knows who Jonathan and Martha Kent are. And for many Superman fans, myself included, some of my favorite scenes aren't of Superman fighting one of his admittedly stale enemies, but instead of when he's having a heart-to-heart conversation with his adopted parents. But there's still hope for the Kents. And Christopher Nolan and Zack Snyder's Man of Steel, they're alive, at least at the beginning of the movie, and are portrayed by Kevin Costner and Diane Lane, giving the Kansas salt-of-the-earth couple a younger and more contemporary image. If Kevin Costner dies, I might leave the theater. Okay, I won't, but it'll bother me for the rest of the movie. Number 2 is Alfred. Who could possibly top Alfred? I think at this point you have a pretty good idea, but how interesting that 2 sets of de facto parents would basically top this list. When the Waynes were tragically murdered, Alfred Pennyworth stepped up to not only manage his employer's estate, but raise their son as his own, with the proper emotional distance one would expect from an English butler. Think Batman's very own Maggie Smith from Downton Abbey. Maybe if he'd hugged Bruce a little more, things would have turned out differently, but not nearly as entertainingly. Plus, Alfred has turned out to be a human Swiss Army knife, not only caring for Bruce Wayne, but Batman as well, thanks to his background in the theater as well as basic medical skills. He's also the only person Batman knows who constantly keeps it real. Yes, Alfred is as vital a member of the Batman mythos as Robin, and becoming almost as popular thanks to nuanced portrayals on Batman the Animated Series in Christopher Nolan's trilogy. He's even taken up the fight alongside Batman in Jeff Johns' excellent Batman Earth 1 and in the upcoming Beware the Batman Animated Series. Now, why hasn't Alfred ever gotten his own book again? Number 1 is Jim Gordon. While Alfred and the Kents raised the DC Universe's 2 greatest heroes, Jim Gordon has almost been like a brother to Bruce Wayne, there from the start, running on a parallel yet contrasting track thanks to Frank Miller's masterful writing in Batman Year One. I know a number of you really liked the animated adaptation, but I'm telling you, read the comic. Jim Gordon not only believes in Batman, but has made his crusade possible by having the Gotham Police Department turn a blind eye to this shadowy vigilante and perhaps save itself in the process. Imagine what would have happened if he had gone the way of J. Jonah Jameson. But Gordon's belief in Batman has cost him. First his daughter, who shared her father's belief in Batman so much she became Batgirl, and then later his second wife, Sarah Essen. And even though Gordon, too, has never had his own title, he is the most developed supporting character on this list. Thankfully, he, too, was given a respectful portrayal in Batman the Animated Series in Christopher Nolan's trilogy. I wager he could reach Agent Coulson status if Warner Brothers and Oldman were willing. And that's my top 10 list of supporting characters in comics. Tell me how you think I did down below, and I hope you'll consider picking up Supurbia number 5 if you're not reading the title already. I've included links in the video description where you can get it online. And that's this week's Stacktastic. I'm Grace Randolph for Think About the Ink, and I'm going to try really hard to get you a new Between the Pages this Friday. Until then, happy reading.